Fractions, decimals, and percents, Part 1. In this video we will have one lesson objective: convert between a fraction, a decimal, and a percent. Let's begin. Fractions, decimals, and percents relate to statistics in the following topics: frequency and relative frequency tables, when we compute what's called z-scores, the concept of probability. They are used in confidence intervals involving proportions and also involving hypothesis testing. So let's begin. A fraction, decimal, and a percent are all ways to represent a number. They all represent the relationship of a part to its whole. A fraction is written as a over b, where a and b are numbers, but b is not equal to 0. A decimal has a decimal point, and a percent has a percent sign. To convert from a percent to a decimal, divide the percent by 100, or another way is to move the decimal place 2 places to the left and then remove the percent sign. For example, 93.1% becomes, as a decimal, if we divide by 100, or if we just move the decimal point 2 places to the left, we get the equivalent number 0.931. For 4.5% becomes, as a decimal, 0.045. And 353%, if we move the decimal place 2 places to the left, we get 3.53. To convert from a decimal to a percent, we multiply the decimal by 100, or another way to do that is simply move the decimal point 2 places to the right and then add a percent sign to the value. We multiply by 100 because a percent is a number compared to 100. So let's look at an example. The decimal 0.345 as a percent, if we move the decimal place 2 places to the right and add a percent sign, we get 34.5%. Or if we take a 0.345 and multiply it by 100, we get 34.5 and then add a percent sign. For the decimal 0.8, again, we have to move the decimal 2 places to the right, so we have to add a 0, and that will become 80%. Or we could multiply by 100. Just don't forget your percent sign. For the decimal 1.02, becomes 102%. To convert from a fraction to a decimal, we divide the numerator, which means the top number, by the denominator, which is the bottom number. For example, for the fraction 3 over 4, we take 3 and we divide it by 4, and you get 0.75. And of course you can do this on a calculator. You don't have to do it by hand. Another example, 4 divided by 3, again, the same digits, but they're in a different order. It does matter. So we take 4 and divide it by 3. You're going to get something larger than 1. And using this on the calculator, you should get 1.3 repeating. And for the fraction 5 divided by 106, using a calculator, the decimal equivalent is something close to 0.04716. Sometimes the decimals are terminating, like in the first example. Sometimes they repeat, but in a pattern, and sometimes there is no pattern. Most of the time in statistics, we will round the decimal to a certain number of decimal places. To convert from a decimal to a fraction, the first step is we write the decimal over the number 1. We multiply both the top and the bottom numbers by 10 for every number after the decimal point. So if there is one number after the decimal point, we multiply the top and the bottom by 10. If it is 2 numbers after the decimal point, we multiply the top and the bottom by 100. If it is 3 digits after the decimal point, we multiply the top and the bottom by 1,000, and so on and so on. This will give us the fraction, and the last step is we simplify the fraction if needed. So we want to see if there's any common factors in both the numerator, top number, and the denominator, the bottom number. Let's look at an example. Write 0.65 as a fraction. So our first step is to take the decimal, put it over 1. We see that there are 2 digits after the decimal point, so that means we need to multiply the top and the bottom by 100. And if you take 0.65, multiply it by 100, you get 65. 1 times 100 is 100. So we have the fraction 65 over 100. Now this does reduce. 5 will go into 65 and 5 will go into 100. So if we divide 65 by 5 and 100 by 5, we get the simplified fraction 13 divided by 20. And we can always double check the fraction and see if we get the correct decimal. If we take 13 and divide it by 20, we should get 0.65. So you can check this on your calculator. Next we have 0.324. So we put the decimal over 1. We see that there's 3 digits after the decimal point, so we multiply the top and the bottom by 1,000. And we get 324 over 1,000. So we have an even number over an even number. So if we divide both the top and the bottom by 2, we get 162 divided by 500. And again, we have an even over an even, which means 2 will go into both these. And if I take 162 divided by 2 and 500 divided by 2, we get 81 over 250. Again, to double check, we take 81 divided by 250, we should get 0.324. So here's a nice diagram showing you the different steps of converting one to the other. Here we have a fraction 1 over 4, or a 1/4. To change this to a decimal, so we're going from a fraction to a decimal, we divide the numerator by the denominator, and you should get 0.25. That should make sense. So 1/4 of a dollar is 25 cents, 1/4. Now to change this decimal to a percent, we take 0.25, we multiply it by 100 and add a percent sign, and we get 25%. So 1/4, 0.25, and 25% all mean the same thing. They're different ways of writing the same number. Next. Now we are starting with a percent, and if we were to change this to a decimal, we take the percent, we divide it by 100, and then we drop the percent sign, so that becomes 0.70, or we could just say 0.7. The zero is really not needed, but you can write it if you like. And then from a decimal to a fraction, we have to take the 0.70, put it over 1, and multiply the top and the bottom numbers by 100, and we get 70 over 100. And then we want to simplify the fraction. 10 goes into 70, and it also goes in 100, so 70 divided by 10 is 7, 100 divided by 10 is 10. So 7/10 is the same thing as 0.70, which is the same thing as 70%. Now we have a decimal, 0.05. To change the decimal to a percent, we move the decimal place 2 places to the right. So that becomes 5, and then we add a percent sign. So 0.05 is the same thing as 5%. And then from a percent to a fraction, we take the percent, we put it over 100, because that's what a percent is, a number compared to 100, and then we simplify. So we get 5 divided by 100. 5 goes into 5 one time, 5 goes into 120. So 120 is the same thing as 5%, which is the same thing as 0.05. Here's a list of some commonly used values, and this will be good practice if you can convert any of these from one into the other. So for example, 10% as a decimal is 0.1, and 0.1 as a fraction is 1 divided by 10. Here's some more commonly used values. 75% as a decimal is 0.75, which reduces as a fraction 3 over 4. Finally, let's try these three problems. Write the fraction as a decimal and as a percent. 13 over 21. Write the following decimals as percentages: 0.2, 0.07, and 3.01. And finally, write 78.5% as a decimal and as a fraction. So you can pause the video, try these three problems, and then check your answers when you're finished. Here's the answers. 13 divided by 21 is 0.619 rounded, which becomes 61.9%. 0.2 becomes 20%, 0.075 becomes 7.5%, and 3.01 becomes 301%. And finally, 68.5% as a decimal is 0.685. To change that decimal to a fraction, we put 0.685 over 1, multiply both the top and the bottom by 1,000, and then reduce. 5 goes into both these values, and we get 137 divided by 200. Thanks for watching.